is from the Ministry of Youth and Sports. Independence Stadium readiness for AFCON qualifications in March. The Independence Stadium has recently undergone substantial renovations to meet CAF standards. However, CAF has determined that the stadium's field requires further improvement to host Category 3 matches, such as the upcoming AFCON 2025 qualifier between Gambia and Comoros, which should take place in November. CAF has offered support through a pitch specialist to assist GFF in meeting these standards. So in the meantime, we will not be playing our next home game at the Independence Stadium. And finally, this is a clarification on the Spanish Circular Migration Program, MOU. The government of the Gambia, in partnership with the Kingdom of Spain, has ratified an MOU on circular migration for seasonal employment. The Ministry of Trade will oversee the pre-selection of candidates through the Public Employment Services Unit, ensuring equal opportunity and transparency in the process. Citizens are cautioned against engaging private recruitment agencies for Spain, as no such agencies are authorized to carry out this process. Further details on the selection process will be shared by the Ministry of Trade. And we repeat, citizens are urged not to pay any money to any agent for the purpose of getting a visa to go to Spain. This is information from the Gambia government. I thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for sharing those vital information with us. We are really grateful. Thank you. So I have the honor to invite the MD to make his presentation. MD.
Good morning, Honorable Minister of Information, Media and Broadcasting Services. Good morning to my colleagues from the GPA. And good morning to all the media present here and to all your viewers, wherever they may be. My name is Usman Jabate. I'm the Managing Director at the Gambia Ports Authority. And we're happy to be here in part of our obligations to do this press briefing to sensitize our citizens about ongoing activities at the Port of Banjul, the Gambia Ferry Services, and the Banjul Shipyard, as well as the Banjul Fisheries Jetty, as these are the organizations that are under the ambit of the Gambia Ports Authority. To begin with, what is latest with the Gambia Ports Authority is that the government has taken a decision and the GPA has entered into a concession contract with an investor from the Islamic Republic of Turkey to modernize the Port of Banjul and construct a new deep sea port in Sanyang village in the south coast of the Gambia. Now, this is with a view to enhancing efficiency at the port and ensure that the Port of Banjul remains relevant in an ever-increasingly competitive port environment. Now, just to give a brief background as to why this decision to go with this partnership arrangement. The Port of Banjul first conceived the expansion program way in 1994, when a master plan was prepared to look at the capacity improvement needs that are required to handle business in an efficient manner at the Port of Banjul. By the time the master plan could not have been implemented due to the funding that was required, could not be accessed at the time due to many challenges. Up to 2002, the need was again expressed to still look at addressing the physical constraints of the Port of Banjul. Then a new master plan was again commissioned in 2002, again updated in 2008. So by the time the new government came in 2016, the infrastructure improvement could still not be realized. And government, in its conscious decision, advised that the master plan that was the basis for the infrastructure improvements that were envisaged had outlived time, because 20 years had passed since those decisions were taken, and therefore commissioned a new master plan. So in 2017, a new master plan was commissioned, and it was won by a company from the Netherlands called Royal Haskoning through an international tender. And by 2017, they came out with a recommendation that the port needs to do immediate capacity improvement in 3 areas. That is, 1, to extend the ship's accommodation. We call them jetties, because currently we can handle 3 ocean-going vessels, and there was need to extend it further. The second component was to look at expanding the surface area we have so that we can construct new container terminal within the contiguous zone of the port. And the third component was to invest in digitalization. Now, the master plan also identified a risk that by 2023, if decision is not made to invest in this infrastructure improvement that were recommended, the port will stand the threat of losing business to neighboring countries. Alongside this recommendation, which was based on a 20-year demand forecast for an envelope of about $131 million, it will see the port through 2019 to 2038, based on the traffic forecast. Now, the master plan alongside also looked at the alternative location of the port of Banjul in the southern coastline. And they came with the primary recommendation that the business is not viable because the initial investment that is required to construct the basic infrastructure, which is a seawall, to have calm waters where ships can come alongside, would cost nothing less than $500 million. And the demand was not very strong for that business model. And such, they advised that we can improve the infrastructure in Banjul, and that will see the port through the 20-year demand forecast, that is 2019 to 2038. Now, in the process, the master plan was approved by Cabinet in July 2019. And then the funding arrangements started. And the GPA was looking at 3 modes of financing. One, to use its balance sheet to serve as a guarantee for the $130 million that is required to do these 3 components. And also to look at the corporate financing from loan from commercial banks, and also engage our traditional financiers, which are these DFIs, we call it, Development Finance Institutions, principally African Development Bank and the European Investment Bank. Because what has happened is the 3 series of the previous port projects were financed by the African Development Bank through support to government on a loan that African Development Bank would lend to government, and then now government would lend to the institution at a premium. So those were the funding options that we have been looked at. So between 2019 and 2022 March, the funding options being looked at, none could materialize at the time. And government also called again and advised that we try to invoke the PPP option. Now, the PPP option was guided principally by the fact that ports and shipping, particularly in the West and Central African region in which the Gambia is situated, it's dotted with all private investment in the ownership and management of port facilities. Now, if you take a cursory look around the maritime landscape, between Nouadhibou in Mauritania up to south in Lobito in Angola, all the ports are dotted with private investment. The big international port operators like the DP World, the MSCs, the Bolores, and APM terminals, they own and manage all these port facilities. So at some point, to remain relevant, the Gambia Ports Authority also has to up its game, because you cannot survive the competition within a mainly private-dominated maritime business because of their advantage in terms of access to financial resources required for this huge investment, and 2, because they also control the cargo and direct where freight goes, and also they bring management expertise and technology to ensure that efficiency is improved. Now, in doing those considerations, government advised JPA to also look at developing a model for Banjul. So when we started, a tender was launched to invite a consultancy firm to act as a transaction advisory so that we can invoke this PPP model. Following the tender, a company called Maritime Transport Business Solutions from the Netherlands, MTBS, won the award. And they were awarded the contract to prepare the business model for Banjul. Now, the business model for Banjul also looked at the demand forecast over the 20 years and prepared the request for proposals. This is the RFP document that was launched into the market. Now, following the launch of the tender, 10 international firms, including one local company, expressed interest to participate in this PPP venture. So by the time the short list was done of these EOIs, 2 dropped and 8 were retained and then required to submit detailed technical and financial proposals, which were then to be evaluated. Now, when these 8 companies submitted their detailed technical and financial bids, evaluation was done, and then 3 were retained as the most responsive bidders. Now, the 3 were Red Sea Gateway Terminals of Saudi Arabia, Yilport of Turkey, and Albarak, also of Turkey. Now, in considering the evaluation report, when it was sent to Cabinet, because there were 3 criteria that were put in the evaluation, that we are looking at the technical adequacy of the proposals from these international firms, and 2, the financial proposals, and then the 3rd criteria that was in the document, in the RFP, was for strategic commercial fit, where investors were given the opportunity to propose alternative solutions that government may consider in this infrastructure improvement project. Now, in considering the report that was sent to Cabinet, Cabinet in its conscious decision reviewed the recommendations and advised that the strategic commercial fit can be invoked for 3 main reasons. Prior to the launch of the RFP, the GPA also had support through African Development Bank, which was the traditional support financier for the 3 previous series of the port infrastructure projects. And the preparatory activities were funded through grant support by the African Development Bank, principally to do climate adaptation for the port infrastructure in Banjul. Because Banjul is peculiar in the sense that it is in an estuary where it is exposed to some climate risks. Now, in doing the study that was financed by the African Development Bank, the assessment was prepared by Royal Haskoning of the Netherlands, also in collaboration with AAAP, the Africa Adaptation Accelerated Program. And the climate resilience study came out with 3 major risks that Banjul is exposed to. By the year 2040, there is a threat of sea level rise by up to 1 meter in the year 2040. And then Banjul is in an estuary, there's increased sedimentation. When the tide flows and ebbs, a lot of silt gets deposited along the shoreline, which causes a lot of need for dredging. And then with the increased precipitation. So these were some of the 3 main risks that the climate risk and vulnerability stress test identified, but also recommended mitigation measures, which involve 15% cost overrun for any investment that was required in Banjul. So those studies also were confirmed prior to the PPP option being launched. Now, the main constraint for Banjul is physical, in the sense that the draft in the access channel to Banjul is 9.5 meters. 9.5 meters, meaning vessels with deeper draft vessels cannot call into Banjul. That was one of the things that government considered. Look, even with this $130 million investment to increase the capacity of the port in Banjul, it will serve your business for the next 20 years. If you do 15% cost overrun for the infrastructure investment to ensure that the infrastructure is resilient to this climate risk, what it physically means is increasing the level of the jetties and the pavement heights to be able to sustain or mitigate against any potential flooding. Your capacity to expand also in the city is constrained because you are surrounded by residential neighborhood and our proximity also to the central commercial district in Banjul. And all of these costs, with the dredging requirement, every 2 years you would need 3 million euros to dredge the channel so that you can have adequate depth along the jetties. Now, government in its conscious decision looked at it and said, okay, all these costs add up, and you cannot be serviced still by deeper draft vessels that would enhance competitiveness in Gambia. Cabinet decided to invoke the strategic commercial fit, that let's open up and invite the bidders, the 3 most responsive bidders, to look at an alternative deep sea port. So then, the 3 bidders were invited to submit commercial proposals as to the development of Banjul, as well as the establishment of a new deep sea port in Sanyang. Now, that resulted in one of the companies from Saudi Arabia responding, but with conditions, that since there's a financial viability gap in investing in Sanyang deep sea port, because the numbers are not right, the business model is not strong, they would only be able to do that if it is triggered by the market forces. The other company from Turkey, Yilport, declined the offer, but then the other company from Turkey called Albarak accepted. So government now invited them to submit a commercial proposal with a view to considering how to go about with the deep sea port in Sanyang. Now, this resulted in the Albarak submitting the proposal in November 2023, and Maritime Transport Business Solutions, which was the transaction advisory firm that was recruited by the GPA, was also called in to assist government in preparing for a review of the commercial proposal with a view to coming up to terms or not with Albarak. So what the advisory firm did with GPA was to look at concession heads of terms, like pre-negotiation, to look at all the commercial elements that Albarak is proposing alongside the financing of the investment that is required in Sanyang. Now, those negotiations started in February 2024 up to 11th of July 2024 when we were able to sign off on this concession agreement. The main highlights of this concession agreement is the investor will commit minimal investment in Banjul, operate and manage the port of Banjul over a 6-year period. During this period, further investigation in terms of location, geotechnical studies, bathymetric surveys to determine the type of design and infrastructure that is to be constructed in Sanyang during phase 1 will also be done. And then phase 1 will be delivered within these 6 years. Now, the activity will transfer from Banjul into Sanyang when the phase 1 in Sanyang is complete. And then in Sanyang, it's a concession for 30 years. The main highlights of this concession agreement is, one, government will retain all of the fixed assets of the GPA. The investor is required and committed to do all the financial resources that are required to realize this infrastructure improvement. And there is no investment from government, no financial contribution from government. As well, government and the GPA will be wearing two hats in the sense that the model is structured in the manner of a landlord and a shareholder. Landlord meaning we concede the port facility to the operator to come and do the investment and operate the port. Shareholder in the sense that we hold 20% equity in the venture, in the special purpose vehicle that is established. Now, all of the operative staff that are involved in cargo handling operations, almost 80 to 90% of the current GPA staff, will be transferred into the SPV under the same terms and conditions of employment. Now, government will get to realize and improve infrastructure such that deeper draft vessels that are calling West Africa will also call Banjul. This will address a fundamental constraint that Banjul has in terms of the draft restriction. As I mentioned earlier, when vessels call West Africa, these international shipping lines, they do what we call cluster operations. For example, Mauritania and Senegal and Gambia and Sierra Leone and Guinea, Conakry would be one cluster. So they deploy what is called West Africa Max vessels. These are big vessels without cranes. We call them GLS vessels. And these are minimum 12-meter draft vessels. When these vessels call to West Africa, they do what we call port-to-port call. Now, because of the draft restriction in Banjul, these West Africa Max vessels cannot come Banjul. They are bigger and they carry more cargo. So in terms of freight charges, they charge less per unit when compared to a direct feeder service that comes to Banjul. That is the trade in Gambia. Gambia is serviced by direct feeder service. That's why the freight usually is more expensive when you quote like Banjul to Dakar, for example. The turnaround is faster. And in business, it's all about turnover. If a businessman can get 100 containers through Dakar in 30 days and 100 containers through Banjul in 90 days, obviously they will choose Dakar. And it's cheaper and it's faster. That's the main reason why cargo, if you hear normally this cargo diversion to Port of Dakar, it's mainly caused by that. Because we are physically constrained by the size of vessels we can attract, and then the space that is available within the contiguous zone of the port limits our capacity to expand inland. So these are all the numbers that government looked at to say, look, even if you invest more than $30 million in Banjul, in 20 years' time, you will come back to the same problem because you'll still have the dredging need. Big vessels cannot call, and you cannot expand towards the city because you are encumbered by the presence of residential property. And what is peculiar also in our expansion is in Banjul, other than anywhere else in the Gambia, people own land in perpetuity. I think this is one of the colonial legacies that we have inherited. That's why people in Banjul, they get compensated both for the land and the structures on them. It's what is called freehold, other than leasehold. So anywhere in the Combos, and the rest of the Gambia is leasehold, opposed to Banjul where it is freehold, we call it. It's challenging to acquire property in Banjul because of the attachment people have to their heritage. And thankfully, we were able to successfully negotiate and just acquire the portion, about 22,000 square meters, that is close to the main port. and the residents were relocated to Kachikali under a compensation package that was mutually agreed. But if you look at the constraint in 20 years' time, it will still come back. The dredging will still be, the need will be there, and then you cannot get big ships to serve your country. So these are the decisions that government looked at and say it makes sense and it's more sustainable to go for the deep sea port option, where government is not required to make any financial contribution. Your fixed assets remain under your ownership. It's not going to be taken as collateral for debt financing in the market. The investor, the senior debt in this infrastructure improvement in Sanyang is going to be carried by the investor. Government has no obligation to be obliged or be liable in the senior debt transaction. Then the infrastructure that will be delivered will be handed back at the end of the period. And there are certain things in the contract that goes to the advantage of government, because you will receive revenues from the gross revenues, a percentage of the gross revenues from the business, both in Banjul and in Sanyang, and then you'll get dividend as an equity holder of 20%. A lot of people keep asking questions, why own our assets and then give it to a foreign investor and hold minimal shares? But the thing is, you are not committed to make any contribution in the investment. And then your fixed assets remain under your custody. So when the activity even transfers to Sanyang, Banjul will revert to the port of Banjul. So this idea of estate development, the development of a cruise and marina, would now be invoked because it is signed in the contract that 75% of the area will now be transformed into a property development, and the 25% remaining would be to service our river transport, which is also part of the concession agreement. In the concession agreement also, the investor is required to develop inland logistics platform in Kawur and in Basse, because we have realized that River Gambia is our game changer in this arrangement. We all remember in the past, in the early 90s, when regional clients would physically or literally sleep on the doorsteps of shops around the central business district in Banjul, waiting for shops to open and buy west and take them to third countries, because the country has some strategic advantages when it comes to the trading environment. It's more liberal. There's no import exchange control. There's no need for third parties in the goods clearance. And we have a very vibrant, young, and very highly skilled and educated workforce. And these are some of the attributes that make businesses to locate in Gambia. So these are the glory that we want to regain. And the river is our game changer in this arrangement. The typical example is 60% of all goods that come into the country find their way to third countries by way of cross-border re-export or transit trade. You see regional clients coming, these long vehicles, all littered around in Banjul. They come to pick wares and take them. The southwest region in Mali, for example, is a big catchment area. The distance from Banjul to those areas is 673 kilometers. And you have a first-class road on the south bank linking through Basse, Wilingara, Kidira, Kai, up to those areas. And our nearest competitor is 1,200 kilometers. So we are by far closer to those destinations, almost half. So the idea is now to cut that distance even by a further half by having a logistics platform in Basse, where high volume, low value cargo like rice, sugar, flour, and other consumable goods will get transported by river barge to Basse. And then trucks coming from those regions, they will not travel up to Banjul. They will just stop at Basse, pick their cargo, and then return. So we believe that the river transport, which is also central in this concession agreement, would be the game changer in this arrangement, so that the country can regain its lost glory as being the supermarket for the sub-region. The important thing to notice in this concession agreement, fundamentally, is that yes, 20% is deemed to be little in terms of shares. But we believe that the transaction process that we've gone through, the investor can even confirm that it was not easy to negotiate 20% in an arrangement where government assets are not part of the transaction process. They are not seeded. You are not doing any financial contribution. All your staff are going to be transferred with the same terms and conditions. You get delivered an improved infrastructure like a 12-meter draft port that will open the country's competitiveness. These are some of the highlights that government looks at. That there may be immediate financial, not losses per se, but profits that were normally being accruing to the port may not be available in the immediate period. But from the year 17, according to the model, you see the revenue started growing, and it will mean more revenue share for government and also more dividend for government. And at the end of the day, because of the infrastructure is improved, and it gets handed back to government, we stand to benefit as a country because we'll have an improved infrastructure. Now, looking at the whole transaction process, we believe that this concession model, which is very innovative, because project financing is now something that is very dynamic. People bring new ideas to the table, and we've done our due diligence. It's not like the investor is not known to us. They have other investments in countries around the sub-region. And what we have crafted in or not crafted, but deliberately done in the concession agreement is to ensure that some of the risks for non-investment are also mitigated by having the investor to commit to performance bonds. In fact, the day before we signed the concession agreement, a performance bond was issued, and these are encashable in banks to make sure that in the event that, or in the unlikely event that the investor fails to honor his obligations in the concession agreement, the government will have a fallback and have to continue with operating the port. And since it went through an international competitive bidding, other interested parties are still waiting to be called to the table and see how we can, in the event of termination and compensation, the port operations will still continue. There are a lot of issues in the transaction model that would stand to benefit us as a country. In the concession agreement, there are certain areas we call reserve matters. Lawyers may be more attuned to define what that means. But in a sense, what it means is there are certain decisions. In as much as we hold the minority shares in the SPV, the majority shareholder, which is the private investor, does not have the latitude or the mandate to take those decisions without our express consent. These are things dealing with financial reporting, dealing with audit, dealing with investment plan, maintenance plan, HR issues, reinvestment. And even in the event that the senior debt is contracted by the investor, there's what we call in transaction processes, dilution of shares, that we are not doing any financial contribution. In the event they go to the capital market to raise the project financing, and the assets are not placed as collateral, they provide the security from their own balance sheet. What that would mean normally would be that the non-contributing party would dilute some of its shares. But we made sure that we deliberately, that whatever happens in the debt financing, our 20% shares remain intact. Because for the simple reason that government took the conscious decision that, look, we ran a model in Banjul, there were responsive bidders, and we could have gone with Banjul. But because of the strategic commercial fit that was put in the bidding document, we wanted to invoke that. And now it's your obligation to also take the financing risk. So because the government is not willing to make any financial contribution. So by and large, these are some of the highlights of the concession agreement. But we are hopeful. And what we have seen on the ground is there is a 6 months conditions precedent, we call it. Because before the contract becomes effective, we have to allow a 6 months gestation period to ensure that the investor fulfills certain obligations that are required to make the contract effective. But what we have seen is they've shown goodwill by committing resources to at least do the infrastructure improvement that are required in Banjul, which we can visibly see on the ground. So we are hopeful that come 10th January, when the contract becomes effective, it will be all improvement for the port of Banjul, so that generally we stand to benefit as a country. Because if the port efficiency improves, the cost of doing business will go down. And when we buy wares from shops, it will mean less price in terms of the cost of retail goods in the market. So by and large, these are some of the main highlights. And in doing our concession transaction process, there was also a communications outreach program that we have developed. We have started principally with our staff. On 3 occasions, we call the general staff, because most times the consternation is amongst the staff that a private investor is coming. The threat of losing jobs is very primary consideration for staff. But we try to allay their fears that the operative staff, all of them are going to be transferred into the SPV under the same terms and conditions. So there has been no job. In fact, if anything, because of the enhanced infrastructure improvement and the construction of the inland logistics platform in Kauru and Basse, we expect even more jobs to be created. And this river is also going to be amalgamated with the cross-river transport for ferry services, because now we have seen the prevalence of bridges all along the river. So the relevance of ferries is becoming less. So now this river revitalization project, we call it, which is also one of the 8 strategic enablers in the new NDP or YIRWA, because we believe that opening up the river would create some new socio-economic opportunities for settlements along the banks that were once very vibrant. We had the Joy Towns, we had the Bansang, all of those up to Kemoto. You have a splutter of economic activity that surrounds the river ecosystem. And also with tourism. We want to also mix the freight transport, passenger transport also with the tourism potential because the river remains underexploited. So these are some of the things that are very much advantageous. At the end of the day, we stand to gain as a country. On the side of the ferries, the African Development Bank also in their support in doing the climate risk assessment provided $20 million grant support in December 2022 to prepare activities that would add value to the main project because they advise that it's good to expand the port infrastructure in Banjul, but there are ancillary activities which will go to add value, things like the ferry services. So the $20 million grant that was given by ADB goes to finance the acquisition of one new green ferry, and the second ferry is a government decision that the GPA has to pay for. So we are going for 2 ferries. And 4 other components were also financed under this grant support. This to widen and extend the Bond Road, which is the main road that leads to the port of Banjul from the Banjul Highway. And to do, the third component is to do an integrated national transport master plan for the Ministry of Transport. And the fourth component is the technical assistance and capacity development for the Ministry of Transport. And the fifth is to mainstream gender in the project implementation, particularly targeting women folk to increase their employment opportunities and youth activities. So those are the components that ADB financed under a grant support to make sure that by the time we go into the port infrastructure, these supporting activities would add value to the main port. By and large, that's where we are with the ferries. As Honorable Minister rightly mentioned, only Kunta Ferry is available providing service between Banjul and Bara. And Kanilai has been subjected to major repairs and is currently dry dock at the Banjul shipyard. But our expectation was that by the time she was slipped out of the water, it would have been by this time of the year that she would have been refloated to continue to provide service. But what we've realized is the amount of work that needs to be done in terms of repairs far exceeded what our expectations were. Because once the ferry was dry docked and the metal plates were stripped, what we've noticed is, because under the ferry, the part that submerges in water, it's all with steel fabrication items. Now, what we've seen is that almost all of the longitudinal and transverse sections that are within the bottom areas are all corroded. So it requires a lot of replating and refixing. So that's what we're doing at the moment. But we're hopeful that by the end of this month, she will be refloated, and then the commissioning engineer will be on the ground to do the re-engineering, so that hopefully by March, it's long, but it's not long, we'll still be there. The Kanilai will be back in service prior to the 2 new ferries coming. Shipyard is also part of the scope of the investment because we have convinced the investor to realize that the shipyard is a viable market on its own because you have a lot of industrial fishing vessels that do not have access. The nearest shipyard we have is the one in Dakar, and it's a floating dock. Even the GPA owns craft and the ferries that would need dry docking. Oftentimes, the slots there are so long in the queue that we spend huge resources to get our own craft, dry dock. So there's a ready-made market, even for ourselves, if nothing, and also the wider fishing industry. Because the only functioning shipyard we have along this west coast is the one in Angola. There's a private facility in Mauritania, in Nouadhibou, which is owned by private operators just to service their ships. So now this is a very vital business for us, and is a very viable business, shipyard. So the investor has looked at the numbers and they've realized that it is worthy to invest. And the opportunity to create more jobs for skillful young Gambians to go into machining, carpentry, joinery, and a lot of jobs can be created in the shipyard. And also the women involved in the fisher folk, they will earn a lot of revenue because some of these vessels, when they come to land their catches at the fisheries jetty and use the shipyard facilities, it creates jobs for them. And also to earn foreign exchange for the country, because some of these ships that are coming to require the shipyard services are going to be invoiced in foreign currency. These are some of the things that is happening at the fisheries jetty. I will be open to questions, and I thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you, MD. We're really grateful for taking us through that detailed presentation on your activities, despite the fact that it was done off the hook. We are really grateful. That is a demonstration of your real involvement in the activities of your institution. To briefly, he was able to discuss about the master plan, the port's expansion master plan, and also took us through the procurement process that led to the signing of the concession agreement with Albarak. Then he also looked at the highlights of the agreement, which basically focus on the benefits that the country seeks to get from the concession agreement. He also talked about the SPV arrangement, which will also be part of the concession agreement, which will accommodate some of the technical staff of GPA, and also did mention their plans to revitalize river transport, and also how it might also impact on tourism and other sectors of the economy. And he also disclosed the plans to procure 2 new ferries for the 2 new ferries, and also their plans to widen the Bond Road, which is also part of the strategic plan and also talked about the establishment of a shipyard, which is also strategic in the sense that it will really provide the requisite revenue that is needed to boost the country's economy. And also their plans to mainstream gender in the activities of ports. We're really grateful. Thank you so much. We will now open the floor for question and answer session. What we will do is we will allow probably 3 questions. We will take 3 questions, and then we will allow you to respond. Then we will open the floor again. You can also ask in the local language if you want. You don't only have to limit it to English. If you want to ask any question in the local language, you are free to do that. And I'm sure the MD and his team will be able to respond to those questions. And then you will introduce yourself. Before you ask, kindly introduce yourself and tell us which media service you are, which media entity you are representing in this session. Thank you. So we will start from. Who has the mic? So we will start with the ladies first. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aret Jasa. I'm a reporter from The Voice newspaper. So, Mr. DJ mentioned that the Kunta Kinte ferry will require a lot of repair and all that. So, are you guys considering buying a new ferry instead of maintaining or repairing the Kunta Kinte? That's my question.
Kanila or Kunta Kinte?
Kanila.
Kanila.
No, which one is the one? It's Kunta.
Plans to buy new ferries. Next, we'll have you. That gentleman, yeah.
I'm Adam Fadera from Member Caring and Home Digital FM. I would like to ask the minister, the Honorable Minister. He made mention of a few points that I wanted to at least a clarification, if I'm permitted.
Yes, you may.
I would definitely like to ask in the local language, in Manika Pashe. Minister,
I hope it has to do with the issues that he
yes, the issues he mentioned here.
Okay, that's fine.
Minister, Honorable Minister, Albarak, Edula Sabafajan, Lafta EF all Clan Mole. Follow, you talk about Spanish Dilo Ning. Yaitandiko agency mantara mol recruit camp, but instead government nebe recruitment kala. But ngaje there is a document me alonko is around the social media be janjandin. How authentic is that document? Document ni member je wala ni diko but now from the Spanish authorities. And the name document ni jibe ya indicate leko the information sort of from media press media news Bengal Gambia janko agency level Gambia many alonko we kodol taka molbul up to $50,000 and then the agreement with the Gambia government Article 3 we may indicate wala ni go Department of Labor wala nyanda more recruiter, but at some point one of the media houses Minister Court Minister of Trade Standard, if I can remember, on an interview me along ko aya confirm la ko agency name ko meni along ko wala be more recruit la ko man sakunda be responsibility ta ko mol meni along ko tata agency lia man sakunda la ya sabo because nim man sakunda ma foko agency be jam multilateral agency lia. So then ni wo moli la kodol di agency la, what step will the government do? Because already moli la kodol di agency la, and then dolbe even Ross, we are receiving a lot of calls from different people ko ndada agency karning kariale, and then we give them money. But then already say ko agency damandreje, so masa kunda bo deal la nyadi la. And the second one momenti wala mu ya indicate ko the president GPU la executive middle and other media houses definitely a president tentu ngaja back and the Gambia president for taking that step. Wala mu banku kuote nin ko na ranga denga kaja. But then this government biri minala in started in 2016 biri changes bekala. Gambian ol jamae même foye wala nyindi ko be draconian law sol bonda jan many along ko they are not media friendly. Government readiness be nyaadile. And how long mba expect la ko nyim luwal be talla jam for government paredal bang ko draconian luwalu ke bonde. And then my third question, I'm very sorry, wala mu Independence Stadium. Independence Stadium akere fendi me alon ko jama be jikirin num ko be next AFCON qualifiers mba mbitala jela. Unfortunately amanke. Mansakunda over if I can get it right, over 400 million or $400 million. Now doko nying keda doko nying among standard nyimmi munekeda. And Jumale munke and muneba kunna for Mansakunda be any step talaje because na kodol dundaje, what would be that step? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the final question? Yes. For this.
Good morning to you all. My name is Alaji Fode Fati from Dambe FM. My question will go to Mr. Jobate. Yes, you did a very comprehensive roundup on the expansion of the ferry, the ports. But what we want to know, this project started in 1994, if I am right, and then the bidding also, you completed it in 2017. How many companies did participate in that? And then, if possible, if we can know the countries of origin as well. And my second question also is the 20% that is for the country in the business. Yes, you also more emphasized on the benefit of the benefit for the Gambia in the long run. But what is the short-term plan for the country? Because as we know right now, the business community is suffering. In fact, the country as a whole, everyone is suffering because of this tight schedule at your work project. So what is the plan for the government in the short term for the citizens? Because of this thing cannot continue for the period of the whole length of this expansion.
Thank you. So I'll allow you to respond. And then.
Thank you very much for those very pertinent questions. To respond to Madam from the Voice newspaper, the ferry being repaired is Kanilai Ferry. And the government and the GPA has already actually signed shipbuilding contracts with Diamond Shipyard of the Netherlands for the construction, for the design and building of 2 new green ferries, we call them. They are going to be, in terms of dimension, the type of Kunte Kinte. One of them has already actually started construction. And it became effective when 20% advance payment was paid for by the African Development Bank in July this year. And the construction is expected to last 16 months. So we expect that by December 2025, the first of the new ferries would have been delivered in Gambia. The second ferry is the one that is being financed directly by the GPA. The shipbuilding contract has been signed already also with Diamond Shipyard, and we're in the process of concluding on the financing bit. So that is what is remaining now. So once we get that financing contract also signed with Diamond Shipyard, it will also follow the same 16 months of construction. It's a design and build of a new ferry. Thank you. On the gentleman, Mr. Fati from Gambia FM, your questions are also very pertinent. Maybe for want of clarity, what was mentioned was that the expansion project in the port was first mooted in 1994. But it started with us developing a master plan. Because to build a marine infrastructure, you would need a whole master plan to look at the demand, like the traffic you expect to handle over a period. And then that will guide you on the infrastructure that you need to build to cater for that demand. So that was the whole idea of starting in 1994, but not that the tender process, not that the tender process started for the construction. What started since 1994 was the development of the master plan. So the master plan was done in 94, and then a new one was done in 2002. It was again updated in 2012. Because if 5 years pass during a horizon, your decision factors may have changed. So that's why when this new government came, they commissioned a totally new master plan, because they advised that you cannot base your investment decision on a master plan that is already 20 years. It's outdated. So with this new master plan, that's the new master plan that recommended these three components, and then also looked at the development of the new deep sea port in Sanyang. So now, once that was done and cabinet approved in July 2019, then we started for the funding. Because the master plan would just identify what you need to do in terms of the infrastructure to improve, to cater for the traffic that you expect to handle over the 20 years. Now, after the master plan, because the master plan will not go into detail. For example, like if you want to build a jetty, we call it a wharf, it has to go with detailed engineering design. And that is not what the master plan does. The master plan will identify, for example, that you expect to have this number of ships in the year. You need to extend maybe the jetty by 200 meters. That's what the master plan will do. But then once you have the detailed design, that will inform you about the exact type of the structure and how much it will cost. And then you'll go to the market to raise the funds to realize the construction. So the construction has not started. It was the master plan that was done. And now by 2020, when government realized that the funding through the traditional partners is slow because they have a lot of integrity and compliance checklists, due diligence. And government, like you said, there's a business to handle. Ships are waiting more than 14 days on average. And what that does is it brings congestion. And when congestion happens, businessmen, because they are not in the business of losing money, for each container that comes to Banjul, they put a $200 surcharge on each 20-foot container. So can you imagine $200 per container for a minimum volume of 60,000 containers that we handle in a year? You're talking about nothing less than $12 million surcharge on the economy. And that $12 million is what you and I and other people that go to the market pay for, because it's a cost for inefficiency. So with this infrastructure improvement, the main thing that we will achieve, like you asked, what can we do in the short term? The short term is to improve the infrastructure so that you reduce congestion. If congestion goes, then that congestion surcharge will now be lifted. There are some commercial decisions that we need to take with our partners, the shipping lines. For example, if ships were waiting for 14 days and now they just come and wait for 2 days, so that congestion surcharge would not be valid anymore. They cannot charge it. So what we can do is to engage them into some commercial discussion that, look, you've been charging $200 for people who send containers to Banjul. Now there's no waiting. So can you pay $100 now to what's the port infrastructure improvement? And then still they will save $100. And then what it will mean, the retail prices of goods will go down. So to answer your question, the capacity improvement will be the immediate gains for the port. Because if ships do not have to wait, it means their cost of doing business would be lower. Because it's freight and it's transport. They earn money while they are moving. That's why it's called freight. Anytime they are stationary, it's all cost because they burn fuel, they have to put their generators on, and burning diesel and a lot. That's why they like to stay less in port because that's more efficient. But like you rightly said, yes, the future is there. But what we can gain immediately is to reduce the congestion, and then the freight rates to Banjul will go down. But fundamentally, if we don't get those big ships calling to Banjul, the freight rate that is quoted to Dakar would be still cheaper than the one for Banjul. But we are hopeful that with these immediate improvements, the ship turnaround time will increase and the cost of doing business would reduce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MD. Baraka Bake Fadera, ila nyininkar kumata Bake, ila nyininkar follow wolo nying Spain quote. Ko agency sol be kodo ta kan banku dingol bulle soto funding kel ka fuke be sambala Spain le. Meme sena follow wala ka foko bring man sakunda announce ko MOU sign tale for ratify. nga fo banko dingol ko mo kana ko do jo parce que nyimmu free mo nyana ka fenjo kata Spain an agency mansakunda agency milto bonde no ngala wati sorota lokon fula koma ngamera ya sa fejele ko agency jumale be maraleng Spain la aning Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates bari o mansakunda fanara ka foko sa o agency fongo sa nara Spain la agency dati je ko tenke mansakunda fongo le be recruitment to kala so mo modara agency to ko do joje itele abetene o agency li mansakunda man kusto je because mansakunda ma fo moyta ko do jo agency to mansakunda asinanir fanan ko nyimu free ti mo nyana ka fenjo anu mba ko en la jam fanan bi ko mo manyana ka fenjo agency to mo moy ko do di agency la ta yela ko do kaninge yela ko do murundi la ngalo nyanda ka senyala yele taro min foka foko wala bota Spanish mansakunda nte o confirm no la ngajale fanan ko ngaje social media nyamen barinta confirm no la fo wadon to nyalom bang fo to nyande barin semi senani wolonko MOU nying pour kaje ko banku dingol isitano Spain du kola nyato silola karo kono isi kodo soto kodo nyini amurna gambe banko nga isi fan nafa isi gambia nafa pour fanan kaje ko koma silo mol kaminta mialon ko akama si bole fenan funding kel kan dika fasilo kan o fanan tala isaje funding kel kara seasonal du kola woron kata kunkol to Spain e do ko ke yejo asi foreign currency fenan gambia e fanan si fan nafa no isi la wululal de mano wodrono mansakunda la jeroti je bari fanan ka recruitment ke ani selection man killing hammolo wolon kaje ko agency de recruitment le kala wobe do ko tala la mansakunda fele den ayana mansakunda e final selection oke bari ngaje ko bring chocho siata sai mansakunda fongo lafta kanjing fongota ay recruitment ne selection oke through the Ministry of Labor Directorate of Labor so on safo hada banko dingole ko mo kana ko dojo agency ma agency bola ko di kaningola mo moy la ko do di agency la tayela ko do pick agency bulu ya murundi la o senyatale fulanyang wolo e kam info ko GPU aning media practitioners so yenim president ngo benta e faraje ka tentu ka jayi kanim bara abedo ko nyimma mina gambe bankun kan fanang ay kairo ming sabatindi gambe bankun kaje ko media be practice kan gambia janne be practice kan kairo kono wo fanan keta ya dani pour journaliste o mialon ko voice newspaper civil suit nyim pura jindi president o ala bete ya kamma aning ala banko din kano kamma ay civil suit nyin jindi la ngami fanan discoje wolo nyim media laws solti kamin fo e ka fa draconian laws mansakunda hammolon pour ka nyilwal bondi ban nyewlwal bondi ibe mu nekela mialon ko fanan sama si banko dingol fanan tankano asi kanta because media fana nyanda ka operate environment mialon ko luwa fana bijele ni luwal bonde because ni luwal pour ka banko dingol tankalon bawo bi momo siwuli ye ku safi faderato anun kute bolaje ye fadera la hajo tinya anun bi mbe jamano min ko ni jaman la bango social media be min kono ten ngamurota ngeso wole fon officiata ngata ngatinyar do ke tinyaro mialon ko mbe ko mo la tinyala keto tinya mialon ko moringol binale ya tarajang bawo ni ngeso muro la we kende ala le mota jala ko tenke sanka banko dingol kanta nying news la news mialon ko kibaro mialon ko wulia kibaro la manke tonyati ite fonga yalon ko mo journalist ite fonga kibaro bul kibaro e fonga kwete la ko amanke tonyati kata kala mokang kayo ka banko dingol kanta wonya fo fendo si taraje sa nin GPB do ko kane kaje ko media council nge bambande nga ke statut traité dinga media council bambande nga sembo di la sembo mialon ko sa e fanansi media control no nyilwal si bondino isaje media council si odo ko keno bari san fengo fene tije mialon ko bi nyilwal bondi mo nebe kala safeguard si kaje ko banko dingol si tankano asi kantano mialon ko long kibaro mialon aka kibar jawol long mialon ko fanga manke toñati bari masakunda hamo ando hamo wole bije hani kabe wote bola wolon kaje ko nyilwal nge bondi ba masakunda la hidole tano bari inata andu mba ke kanne wolon berinding GPU mitta nga kachale andum bewu ke kanne Minister of Justice nga contact le nyilwabe bolale ba ninga bondi mba mexolo nga media council sembentu ya esaje financial do ko keno esaje nga min sori ka fami ko safeguards bari ka foy ko masakunda la hamulon pour kaje ko nyilwal nge bondi ba luwalo mi alon am beta democracy to na stadium ye amanto min fo man show fo wolon iko million kemenani won fanan kaje wala nya bari ntemalon jelle spenta stadium da bari semi fe wolon ko ni stadium mo kabri 1983 la yalo bli yalo fo san hani major comprehensive renovation mankeje do tinyaro min ka sen wara waratale sa mbirin ka afnata yedula be correct le fe ngo be betata le iko pichoni e ka katawo dam fu nyamo minkan wolem kuti mialon ko hani sa wala man pare folo wodu manke ku koleari ngoti bawon yatara everything else be paritale lampol paritale skobodol paritale sirangol paritale security fensol everything be paritale sa min drong iko wala mialon ko sa wala to demanding drong wolon picco de nyamo mialon ko kato kadam fu wala kan sa iko ifangol be mokila na mialon ko lon expertoti pour anen jife fe do ko ke pour kaje ko picco ya do ko banyimu do ko mialon ko ate banola lon keling wala lon fula wala lon sa min kuma dawlon ko do ko commencer tale andum fon sala bang andum jikita ko nimmu gambe bela kolati manyana ka politiko ke nyinkono mbe nga kambe nga ke banko dingol ti ngaje ko na stadium moy pare en se jodi ma no nyame mbe nga ke wonya e sa na stadium moy pare bawo ni gambe plede jan to bele sa jibeno oto nyu kulti mi alon ko manyana ka politiko ka kono mbe nga kambe nga nyo dema nga duwa kaje ko sa picho nying mba do kulale ning ala sonda na next home ngembe kala match 2025 ti ning ala sonda mbe play la Gambia Albarak.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We will now open the floor again for another batch of questions from our... Don't forget to introduce your name and the media company you're working for.
Good morning. I'm Jenke Caesar from The Point newspaper. And my question is to the DA. Considering the fact that Gambia is benefiting 20% from the concession contract with Turkey, is this going to directly affect charges at the ports for importers and exporters and ordinary people that uses the ferry?
Thank you. Any other question? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Amadou Manja. I'm from Ferry newspaper. So my question is directed to ports. We want to know whether ports have done any survey or study to ascertain that there's a deep sea in Sanya. And if there's a study, can you share it with the media?
Any other question?
My name is Alaji Fati from Dambe FM. Yes, Honorable Minister, I just want you to help me here to clarify this point. The press conference here, is it purely on the issues that they table here, or we can ask general?
You can ask general questions.
You can ask.
Yeah, you can ask them.
Okay.
Yeah, because I want to ask the manager of our port, Mr. Jobate. There have always been a lot of talking surrounding GPA when it comes to corruption in the country. And then he is the right person to ask certain things to clarify that, to make that point clear. Because I was sitting here, I was expecting maybe after his roundup, probably he's going to delve into one or two issues surrounding corruption in ports. But
just ask the question. Yes.
The case regarding the rating unit still is not clear. And then there was another heavy saga between the dock workers and the staff at the ports as well. So all these are things that probably he also can take opportunity and address.
If you have a question, ask him the question, he'll answer.
Yeah, what I'm asking here is like the saga at the rating unit. It went up a national level, up to a police investigation, but after all, we never had anything about the saga as we speak right now.
Okay, so you want him to clarify on that. Okay, thank you. Andy.
All right, thank you, Janke Sise from Point newspaper. The 20% equity that we hold in the business is for sharing of profits. If the company makes profit at the end of the year, and 20% is what we have as our share of any dividend that is to be distributed amongst the shareholders. But then the point you asked about the charges at the port, whether they will be impacted. What we expect is the tariff will be maintained, because one of the things in the concession agreement also is that the tariff is still regulated by government. And what is happening at the ports is that our tariff remains unchanged since 2013. And in 2013, there was a 55% reduction. So that is what is still maintained. Because at the time, government decision was to at least alleviate the hardship on the population in terms of the price of goods. So the decision was taken to reduce the port tariff by 55%, and that is what is still being maintained. What we expect in terms of charges at the port also is with this capacity improvement, the cost of doing business will reduce, because the shipping lines, as I said, if they have demurrage, they just put it on the price of the freight, and the businessmen will also put it on the price of the goods. So if there's efficiency, it means lower cost, and lower cost will mean lower cost of goods in the retail at the retail level. With regards to Amadou Manjang from Foria about the deep sea in Sanyang, a scoping mission was done initially, even by the GPA, and they have studies that identified that, you know, it's Banjul Port is in an estuary, and the estuary with river ports normally is the typical of river ports to have very shallow waters. That's what we call draft. That's the clearance between the surface, the sea level, and the seabed. And that is what is 9.5 meters in Banjul. But anywhere in the coastline, because it's the open sea, you have deeper draft or depth along the coastline. But why Sanyang is, we've done our own scoping mission between Bigelow up to Jereng. And we've realized that Sanyang has a natural bay, and it is closer to the distance where you need to dredge to have that 16-meter clearance. So yes, there's a lot of locations that are susceptible to be built a new deep sea port, but Sanyang will be the most cost-effective. And what has happened in Sanyang is the investors, they also confirmed when they were doing their geotechnical investigation. I think this was a satellite map they had. They looked at the water dynamics around the area and saw that there's like a natural channel leading to the bay in Sanyang. For them, they believe that it's an endowment, that look, this country has something that is very peculiar. It's like a natural bay that is leading to a natural channel, sorry, that is leading to the bay in Sanyang. So that's why Sanyang is the most attractive location from all the investigations we have done. It is the most cost-effective, and like I wish to inform you that this is a natural phenomenon that has happened. They were doing their scoping mission, and they realized that, look, there is a natural channel that is leading to the bay in Sanyang. So to try to build the infrastructure, it will be more cost-effective. So that's the reason. And then it is open to a wider land area that you can build a lot of support infrastructure that will support the port business. So these are some of the advantages that Sanyang has. And yes, we can make the report available. On to Alaji Fati of, is it GFM? Gambia FM. Dembe FM. Yes. Yes, Mr. Fati, the allegation about corruption at the port, particularly the rating unit, I think we have an interest in unearthing what may have happened more than anybody else, because it's our administration. And to tell you the truth, personally, this is not the type of legacy that we want to bequeath to generations to come. It's always good to be truthful about issues, because it's public service. We are endowed with, we are entrusted with responsibility, and we know that we are susceptible to scrutiny. I mean, it just strains credibility that you would think that one would be in a public office and then, you know, do things that would go unnoticed and then the public would not complain. No, it cannot happen. It's public service, and we know that we don't expect to get a good name. But what we are mindful about is we have our own misgivings, but we try to correct them because it's trust. It's always good also to give the background that the way this saga happened is through a whistleblower. If people decide to connive, to access paperwork would be very difficult. But thankfully, when this whistleblower approached management that there's a suspected transaction going on, immediately a senior management meeting was called up, and we set up our own internal investigation just to show you that we have interest in making sure that we unearth it. Now, in the investigation, because the word was already out in the public, figures have been thrown around. But knowing what we know from the other side, we knew with certainty that to unearth what may have been going on would require a lot of effort, a lot of collaboration. And that is why when word got out to the street that $400 million is missing at the GPA rating unit, we decided to call up our own investigation. And by the time the investigation was complete, we gave them 3 weeks there was increased pressure from the public also. So we said, okay, let's stop the investigation and call the National Audit Office in. This was in February 2022. Now, the National Audit Office came in, and by August 23, they submitted their report. And the figure that was in the report, because the report is now public, is $17 million may have been deemed to have been missing through different activities that were reported, from suppression to using fake receipts to using different methods. It was not like one activity, it was a series of activities. Now, the primary recommendation of the auditors was they needed further investigation, like to call the National Police, who have the expertise to do forensic investigation, because it will involve calling witnesses, going deeper into the thing, because the auditors' complaint was that there was not collaboration from the GPA that were involved directly working with them. And at times, some of these things you can expect. People will be very reluctant to come up with information that will be self-incriminating. So that's why they decided to call in the police. Now the police have come in. This was August 2023. The police came in. Immediately the report was submitted. The next day they came on board. And what you know is what everybody else knows, that the police have concluded their investigation. And they have now submitted the report to the Attorney General's chambers for legal opinion prior to the next steps. But by and large, what we may also be asked is, what have you done to make sure this thing is not? Because it's one thing to suspect fraudulent activity, but it also takes something else to make sure that whilst you are investigating, this thing is not still recurring. So one of the things that we did fundamentally was to make sure that wherever there's human interference in the processing, we remove it and put in IT systems. Now, if you go at the port, you can, from your mobile phone, clear goods. You don't have to travel with paperwork. Because anywhere there is human interference, exchange of paper, it is either solicited or offered. That's the risk that's involved in paperwork. And we have been aware about that. And that's why we came up. And this, the digitalization transformation that we did, we were doing it purely using in-house resources. Because we have one of our components, like I said earlier, 3 components that the master plan recommended was to extend the jetty, do a new container terminal, and invest in digitalization. Because the world is now more going digital. But then that is a whole project component of its own, where you can, at the comfort of your mobile phone or your laptop, track physically the location of goods. For example, if you do a container, if you just key in the container number, you can tell where it is, whether it's on the terminal or on the ship waiting or whatever. That's what we call terminal operating system. It's TOS. But before that comes, you have other activities that involve a lot of paperwork. So those are the things that we try to phase out. And we have successfully done that. From the rating unit to the drawing of gate passes to the tallying, we all use now electronic systems. So the fact of the matter that you would sit in the comfort of your office and people will come, that's the way it has happened. Goods will stay in the ports long and they are charged demurrage. So in calculating that demurrage, what the practice was, the clerks would have to rely on a calendar, start to check the date of arrival, how much is due as per the tariff, look at the schedule and calculate. So those are the things that brought in a lot of inefficiency. And that's why there was complicity in this whole arrangement. But by and large, we have the interest as a GPA to ensure that we honor this thing. Because one, our image and our reputation is at stake. And personally, like I told you, this is not the type of legacy you would want to leave after having served in an institution for this number of years. With hindsight, we could have done it otherwise. But thankfully, that we're able to address it going forward. And we will make sure that this risk is eliminated in the port. In fact, right now, you can confirm for yourself, when you go to clear goods at the port, that you don't have to take paperwork and go through. Because that's the inefficiency that is brought by human interference, what brings out these kind of problems. Yes. But now the matter is at the Ministry of Justice for legal opinion, and then due process will be followed. As I said earlier, it's in our interest to make sure that we honor corruption and fight it wherever it is. For dock workers, there was a transformation that was launched. The problems were they were having jobs for life and not going on retirement. But what we have successfully done is to agree with them on a severance package. So all the age workers, 57 and below, are retained. All the above 57 have been retired through a compensation package that was successfully implemented. So now we don't have an issue with dock workers. It's a private company that we hold shares, and the workers hold shares. So that's the arrangement we have with dock workers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now open up for another batch of questions. Zainab, there's someone.
Okay. This time around, I want to throw this question to Mr. MD pertaining to the ferry service. Last week, we have seen a press release indicating that all security servicemen and women in uniform will be paying normal transport fees at ferry service, except the Gambia National Army. And then there are a lot of complaints, either on the social media, even in some of the security personnel's WhatsApp groups. There are a lot of complaints there, which we know something about. They complain that they are segregated. So I don't know what you have for them on that.
Someone does it.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Matar Jase from the Fato Network. I think my colleague have just asked the question that I want to ask, but I have a question for the minister directly for the government. Honorable Minister, can you tell us why the government only concentrating on the Spain one and leaving the Morocco, I don't know, the other one with the agencies? Because there's a lot of concern why government only want to handle the Spain and leaving the Saudi one with the agencies. Because so many people are saying that these agencies, the government, so many people are saying these agencies are collecting money from people. A lot of money, they are charging them. And then, I think so one of my colleagues asked the question. I think if somebody came and said that give one agent a money, can the government take a legal action against that agency so that that agency, so that everybody can see the clear information? Regarding about the other thing, we know that the president is supposed to go to meet the people on Monday. As a government spokesperson, what can you tell us regarding about this importance of this meet the people tour, and then why people have to go with the president? We see that so many people, when the president is going out, we see so many political people are following the president, maybe trying to make it as a campaign issues. What can you tell us regarding about this meet the people tour coming up?
Thank you.
Thank you. Last question, if there is any. That one.
Yeah. I'm Amadi once again. Ferry. Yeah, I wanted to. Amadou
Ferry.
Yeah, I did mention about that you are working on those secured 2 new green ferries. So there's a grant from African Development Bank, 20 million. So I want to know, you said the port will provide the cost for the other ones. I want to know the cost. How much will the port provide for that?
Thank you. MD or Minister, you want to come?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ferreira, from King FM for that question. I think the ferry, as you rightly said, it's not something that is new. It has been a practice that has been going on. But to be more in answer to your question, there's no segregation. What has happened is the security services, they use what is called crossing warrants. And crossing warrants is when they're on mission, and this we reconcile, and their command always settle. The one that is bringing the contention is the one for the Gambia Armed Forces. And the Gambia Armed Forces, there was a Gambia Armed Forces Act that a particular section that allowed them to be crossing the ferry free was repealed, in the sense that that particular section was deleted. So, but now command has engaged the GPA management and the ferry services that due to the nature of their deployment, they issue warrants for mission. So it's different from the warrant that we issue for crossing. So I think that clarification has also to be made. But yes, there's no need to belabor the point at this level. What we have done as a responsible organization is to ensure that we do extensive consultation before certain decisions are taken, all with a view to ensuring that we provide a service that is more customer friendly, because these are users of our ferries. So as we speak, because the notice is short, we have engaged the affected security apparatus, and 50% discount has been offered for all fares that they pay to cross our ferries, up till in January, when more extensive consultation would have been done with a view to agreeing on a rate that they would pay. And you may have heard the general manager was also on air during the weekly Ferry's radio talk show to show that ticket bundles are now being sold with a view to giving incentive on people that are buying in bulk. So those are all things that we are doing. But at the end of the day, collecting the revenue is also essential for the sustainable operation and management of the ferries. But we are not segregating or discriminating amongst service security apparatus, security personnel in this country. But again, as I said, we are engaging in a very constructive manner, and we believe that the issues will be resolved because they are users of our ferries, and we are all partners in the same issue. On the Matar's question from Fatunero, I think that's more for the minister. Mr. Manjang from Ferry, is it? Yeah, your question about the cost of the ferry. Yes, the African Development Bank is paying for one of the ferries. So the $20 million grant that was accorded to the government, part of it goes to finance the new ferry, which is about $13 million. So the GPA would pay the other $13 million for the second ferry. So that's the arrangement. Because the ADB is a grant to government. But the second one is being paid for by the GPA. Thank you.
Thank you. Mata, do you want this in English or in Mandinka? All right. Your first question has to do with why is it that only the Spain arrangement will be handled by the government and the others by the agencies. I think obviously that's very evident that because the Spain one has garnered more interest than the other ones, UAE and Saudi Arabia. And as a responsible government, we really need to be extremely careful how we handle these things. They can be very, very sensitive. And we want to ensure a clear and transparent process so that both Spain and Gambia will be happy at the end of the day. So it is government's view that the Spain one has garnered more interest, and therefore government has to really take charge of that. Now, when it comes to the payment legal action, that is not the job of government. If government had initially announced from the onset that nobody should pay a dime to any agency, and you pay your money to this agency, and you realize that they receive the money fraudulently, it is your job to take them to the police and recover your money. Because the government the government cannot engage. These are transactions between citizens. Government cannot engage. If government had asked people to pay, and later government backtracked, yes, but government had made it very clear from the beginning that nobody should pay any money to any agency. Now, if anybody who collects your money telling you that they'll take you to Spain, and later came out that they had no mandate to collect your money, it is your responsibility to take them to the police and recover your money, not the government of the Gambia. We cannot do that. The only way government comes in is when the state, the police, can now help you as a citizen to recover your money. That is why but government, as a government, cannot really engage in those kind of activities. So if you, Matar, had paid your money to any agency, which I suspect you have done, go and get your money from that agency by engaging the police. So when it comes to the Meet the People store, this is a constitutional requirement that the president should go around and meet the people to discuss with them, to engage with them, to know exactly, particular time of the year, to engage farmers as to how they are doing with the rainy season, the support they need, but not only, but citizens at large. And I think this has been a practice. This is nothing new. It's been happening since the Jawara era, the Ajame era, and now it's happening. So, but what do you expect? When the president moves with an entourage. That happens everywhere in the world. So you cannot expect the president to move with 2 or 3 cars or 2 or 3 people. He's going to meet the people's store. He has to go with a team, with the protocol, with security, with government officials as well, because there are places he is going to visit where he needs government officials to lead and show and guide him what has been done there, what's happening. So government officials also go as part of this trip. That is why even before they meet the people's store, government officials, ministries are asked and MDAs are asked to provide names of places where the president can visit in terms of where the projects are. The president needs to go and see firsthand how these projects are going, because this is taxpayers' money. That is why he's going for a tour, to get firsthand information about the needs and challenges of the people, to discuss with them their aspirations, to be able to supervise and see how projects are ongoing that has taxpayers' money component. So it's important that also public officials also go with him to guide the entire process. So we don't see anything with that. On the 18th, the tour starts, and it ends the 6th. It's an opportunity for the president to meet the people and engage with them at a personal level to understand exactly what's happening in these areas, in these communities. So this is an opportunity for the president, but also for the citizens to meet their president and discuss issues with him as well. Thank you.
Do we still have questions? I guess this will be the final round. Any question? No? MD, I'm not sure whether you will want, there's any issue you want to clarify before we give you that opportunity, yes, before we wrap up. Thank you.
I would say thank you, PS, and thank you, Honorable Minister, and thank you, colleagues, as you've been normally referred to as the fourth estate. It shows your importance as also one arm of government. We will leverage on your platform as the fourth estate to provide what I personally call a consultancy. But it's a consultancy that unfortunately you are not paid for. Because coming to engage public officials also requires some work and effort, because I can imagine you do a lot of background work, trying to see where issues are, going to do your own investigative part to make sure that you bring out credible and news that is worthy to put out there. As the minister rightly said, he's your line minister. Maybe he has more information to give you as to how your profession is being handled or being assisted by government. But I can tell you what we know as public servants is we're very mindful about our responsibility, and we know that we are open to scrutiny and criticism. You have a lot of instruments that government is putting to ensure that public servants are accountable for their action, because, like, as I said earlier, it's public service. We don't expect to get a good name, because it's a service that we are providing that should impact people's lives in a positive way. So there's a lot of instruments that government has put in this: access to information bill. We prepare financial statements. We have audited reports. We go to National Assembly, PACPEC. There's the public inquiry. And even as citizens, access to information, you can walk into any of our offices. As responsible officers, we should be able to open our doors and provide the information that is required, because it's a public office. That's why it's, the name goes like that. But again, I would not hesitate to say we will take advantage. As I said, you are providing a consultancy to us by criticizing us. So that's the way I perceive it. And maybe just as a way of announcement, the Gambia and the GPA is hosting the 32nd Intermodal Africa Conference and Exhibition. This is the biggest gathering of port operators, cargo owners, shipping lines in the whole of Africa, and it's to be held at the Caraba Beach Hotel from the 26th to 28th of this month. And you're all invited to make the coverage, because it's by far the biggest gathering of maritime transport actors, from ship owners to senior executives. And there's going to be very interesting speeches to be delivered by distinguished speakers from across the world. Almost about 200 delegates are expected to jet into the Gambia, so that we can also showcase Destination Gambia as a place for doing business and leisure, to answer to our name as Smiling Coast. I thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of this session. We will close by giving the opportunity to the Minister to give the final remarks. Honorable.
Thank you very much, PS, for wonderfully hosting this event. Thank you very much to every one of you, but particularly I thank the Gambia Ports Authority under the leadership of Mr. Usman Jobate and his team for gracing our call to come and face the media to discuss pertinent issues concerning the Gambia Ports Authority. We've always said this, that the Ministry of Information, Media and Broadcasting Services, our desire is to engage in proactive disclosure of information, and we see you as critical partners, the media. You are the conduit between us and the public. We are here to serve the public by ensuring they have accurate, timely, authentic, and relevant information. And we cannot give that to the public without you helping us do it. But also, we also want to bring information from the public to the government. We want to know what the public is thinking. What are their aspirations? What are their challenges? And you also can bring that to us as a government, so we can be able to engage in what we call responsive policy making with responses to the needs of the citizens. So we thank you for your service as always, and we think this is always an opportunity to hold government officials accountable, but also to promote the spirit of transparency. I've always argued, and I'll argue again today, that the government, under the leadership of His Excellency Albarak, is one of the most transparent in the history of this country. We are always ready to face the media, and we are always ready to give information to the public, because we know we are accountable to the public, and our desire is to promote and consolidate our democracy, and we cannot do that without promoting the spirits of transparency and accountability. So we thank you for coming today. We thank all the media houses, our media partners. We thank you all. We thank the staff of the Ministry of Information and Media and Broadcasting Services and Department of Information Service. We will have our next press conference in 1 month. It's a monthly event. But for your information, on Friday, we're having the bi-weekly ministerial Mansakunda. And I'm happy to inform you that the Minister of Public Service will be our guest for this week's Mansakunda. And we invite you all to attend and grace that very important occasion. Until next week, I thank you, Honorable, and your team, and I thank all the media houses and all those who attended today. Thank you.